Welcome to Guns, Guns, Gear, and Guns with Gary Gunderson. I am Gary Gunderson. 60 Minutes decide to delve into the gun control debate again by arguing that the border is far too open between the United States and Mexico, due to firearms flowing from the United States into Mexico.
But few people are talking about another crisis at the border: guns. An estimated 200,000 to 500,000 U.S. firearms are smuggled into Mexico every year, part of what's known as the Iron River. Mexico says those American guns are responsible for much of the cartel violence that's plagued its country. The government of Mexico has filed lawsuits in U.S. courts against a handful of gun stores and one of the largest gun manufacturers in America.
So you can see where this is going. It's all America's fault that there are guns in Mexico. If it wasn't for U.S. gun laws, Mexico would be a paradise. Oh, and 60 Minutes lies to the viewers within the first 3 minutes of this segment.
This past March, we spoke to then President López Obrador in Mexico City. We were surprised who he said was partly to blame. Where is the cartel getting their guns?
De Estados Unidos.
From the United States.
You were not surprised. You knew exactly what he was going to say when you set up this interview with the former president of Mexico, who has been outspoken on this issue. So that's just a lie. It should also be noted that the United States has many, many times the firearms as Mexico, and yet the Mexican homicide rate is 3 times that of the United States on a per capita basis, which means it's not just the guns.
We have confiscated, in the time that I've been in government, 50,000 guns of high power, of high caliber, 50,000 guns, and 75% of them from the United States.
Look, obviously guns going to criminal cartels is bad, but what about the other 25% of firearms? It's just like how states like Illinois blame every surrounding state for the crime problem in Chicago. I noticed the surrounding states that have freer access to firearms do not have the same crime rate as Chicago.
His government was pursuing 2 civil lawsuits in U.S. courts seeking $10 billion for the damages.
I didn't know we could do that. Can we sue Mexico for all the crimes committed by illegals who have entered our country through Mexico?
The other filed a year later against 5 U.S. gun stores for what Mexico claims are, quote, reckless and unlawful business practices. Is it the U.S.'s responsibility, or is it the Mexican government's responsibility to keep the guns out?
De los dos.
Of both.
Old El Paso.
You cannot sell weapons to just anybody.
Oh, so Mexico gets to decide which American laws are reckless, according to this gun control lawyer, and the never-corrupt country of Mexico.
Like the U.S., Mexico's constitution grants citizens the right to bear arms. But unlike the U.S., that right comes with a long list of restrictions. There's only one gun store in Mexico, but before customers can enter, they have to show proof they've passed psychological tests, drug screens, and extensive background checks. The store sells about 1,000 guns a month, mostly shotguns, small caliber rifles, and handguns.
60 Minutes clearly lying again, implying the U.S. has no firearms restrictions, which it clearly does. Not just in certain states, but there are all sorts of stupid federal laws that restrict the right to bear arms. Also, are there absolutely 0 gun crimes traced back to this single gun store? It doesn't say that, just that the cartels favor other types of firearms.
What civilians can't buy here are the weapons the cartel favors. Those are not legally sold anywhere in Mexico.
Cartels' favorite weapons are weapons of war. Belt feds, 50 caliber rifles, guns that you can shoot from a mile away.
Well, they aren't sold legally, but they're still a problem. Almost like a giant criminal enterprise will commit crimes to get what they want. And this tired phrase, weapons of war. These are certainly primarily semi-automatic firearms, which are not adapted by modern militaries. Oh, and also the pistols sold at the Mexican gun store are certainly also weapons of war.
Tim Sloan worked for the ATF for 22 years. His last assignment was running the ATF's 4 field offices in Mexico.
This was legitimately new information for me. Why is the United States ATF an international organization?
Sloan says most of the guns the ATF traced in Mexico were sold directly to traffickers or to so-called straw purchasers, someone who buys a firearm on behalf of another person. In this case, Americans buying guns that ultimately end up in the hands of the cartel.
Well, I mean, it's pretty easy, right? So straw purchasers, you know, you're offering a 23-year-old girl in Arizona $4,000, $5,000 just to go into a store and buy a gun for you.
Can you send a 24-year-old to go buy an AK-47?
Oh, as many as they want.
Wow, sexist and derogatory. Good job, referring to a fully adult woman as a girl, as if an adult woman could not want an AK-47 for fun or self-defense. They pretend they don't know modern sporting rifles are extremely popular and that a 23 or 24-year-old is still somehow a child.
Won't somebody please think of the children?
And how do they get them into Mexico?
Well, that's the easy part. Just drive across the border.
That porous border works both ways. Over 7 years, the ATF traced 50,000 American guns recovered in Mexico to gun dealers across the United States. But Mexico's lawsuit names just 5 dealers from one state, Arizona.
We believe they're liable for actively facilitating the trafficking of firearms that empower the cartels.
And this is the big push being done by Mexico, propped up by American gun control activists, trying to find law-abiding companies guilty when someone takes a lawfully sold product and commits a crime with it.
A cartel without firearm is just a gang.
This is so stupid. Yep, gangs are famous for their pacifism and nonviolence, and they certainly could not do anything with the other 25% firearms coming into the country or the ones already in the country.
The 5 gun shops that you've named in Arizona, how did you choose those 5 gun shops?
It's based on who do we believe are the bad actors in this dynamic.
U.S. law prohibits the ATF from publicly releasing specific gun trace information. 566 guns recovered in Mexico over a 4.5-year period were traced back to the Arizona gun dealers named in Mexico's lawsuit. And nearly 200 of the guns came from one dealer.
Earlier in the report, they mentioned 50,000 firearms crossing the border, so the gun dealer they specifically call out accounts for 0.004% of those, which is not a lot. And the other 4 named in the lawsuit average out to 0.00183% of these firearms. Not exactly a smoking gun.
The ATF has said a crime gun trace does not necessarily indicate gun dealer wrongdoing.
As the owner of the store said, if there was a hint of wrongdoing, they would have been completely shut down by the very aggressive ATF.
The gun shop owners we spoke to said, look, I'm running the background checks, I'm filling out the paperwork, I'm doing everything that I'm supposed to do. Isn't that enough?
Absolutely not.
Gun retailers say it's really hard to know sometimes if somebody's a straw buyer, right? That they come in with a good cover story and you have to believe them.
It's pretty obvious. I mean, you see these multiple sales of AR-15s. You see these large cash payments. You see these persons coming back to the store every few days or every few weeks. I mean, these are not normal buying patterns.
Here's the thing. When it is obviously a straw purchase, gun shops will stop the sale because they don't want that heat from the ATF. I've seen it happen in person. But this gun control activists' warning signs are nonsense. Multiple sales of AR-15s. I know plenty of people with multiple ARs. Some were bought in quick succession due to fears of bans and things like that. Paying in cash is a red flag. Credit card companies were in the news about reclassifying purchases of firearms or at gun shops so it can be specifically tracked. Maybe someone who likes firearms would not want to buy a firearm that way because they don't trust those companies. That is completely reasonable. Not to mention the earlier example of a girl wanting to purchase an AK as a red flag.
Inconceivable!
And there's no good reason why manufacturers don't say, look, if you're selling our guns, use best practices.
Which is why Mexico filed its other lawsuit against gun manufacturer Smith & Wesson. Under U.S. law, gun makers have typically been shielded from liability when one of their guns is used in a crime. But Mexico is arguing the manufacturer is aiding and abetting gun trafficking to the cartels.
How can you say manufacturers are responsible for anything when there are so many steps in the process between the time that they make it and it goes to the retailer and maybe it's sold to somebody else or resold? How can you trace it back and say it's the manufacturers?
When manufacturers make the decision, we're going to sell guns through dealers no matter what their record is, no matter how many crime guns they're selling. That's on them.
I talked about this already in a recent video, but punishing gun dealers who followed the law by refusing to let them sell your firearms is overkill. I feel like the ATF reports this just so gun control groups can latch onto it like a barnacle. They aren't doing anything illegal or they would be shut down, so we're just letting you know that someone committed a crime with a stolen firearm or the purchaser lied on their gun purchasing paperwork, which I hear is a pardonable offense.
In the last 4 months, cartel infighting has killed more than 500 people in Sinaloa. According to documents obtained by 60 Minutes, 47 guns were seized after Guzman's capture, including an AK-47 style rifle traced back to one of the defendants in Mexico's lawsuit, Ammo AZ.
4 months of intense fighting with these cartels and one traced back to one of these nefarious gun shops in America. That ain't bad. What do you think? Will this lawsuit award billions of dollars to Mexico so their corrupt government can then filter that back to the cartels again so they can pay for more straw purchasers? Let me know in the comments below. If you have made it to the end of the video, please consider joining my Patreon to support me. If not, can you please at least like the video, share it with others, and be sure to subscribe to the channel for more updates on stupid gun control pushes like this and to help the channel grow. Thanks for watching.